It wasn't about territory. It wasn't about revenge. It was about sending a message no one could ignore. That night, as the world watched, a single strike echoed far beyond the blast zone. It was not just an act of war. It was a calculated statement, crafted to shatter illusions and redraw the lines of power in the Middle East. For years, tensions had simmered beneath the surface, silent rivalries, quiet deals, and hidden warnings exchanged in back channels. But when this strike happened, it cut through all the diplomatic noise like a lightning bolt in a dark sky. It was a move meant to speak in a language understood by every leader in the region's strength, resolve, and the willingness to act when others only threatened. The target wasn't just military, it was symbolic. It said, "We can reach you. We can change the game whenever we decide." That was the real weapon, psychological dominance. And in the hours that followed, the shockwaves didn't stop at the blast site. They traveled through every palace, parliament, and war room, making leaders rethink their positions, their alliances, and their next moves. This was not a war for land. It was a war for leverage. Every nation suddenly found itself questioning the strategies they had relied on for decades. Those who thought they were untouchable began tightening security. Those who had been silent started speaking. And those who had been loud went quiet, realizing that the rules had just been rewritten. What made this moment historic wasn't the scale of destruction, it was the depth of its consequences. The strike shifted the balance of power in ways no summit or treaty ever could. It made clear that the old playbook no longer worked, that a single, precise act could dismantle years of planning. In the days that followed, the air in the Middle East felt different, charged, uncertain, and tense. It wasn't just a region on edge, it was a region in transition. And everyone knew one thing for sure after that strike: nothing would ever be the same. The first key point centers on the idea that the strike was never about the physical land or immediate military gain. It was about psychological warfare. The real objective was to send a message powerful enough to unsettle even the most confident players in the region. In modern conflicts, the battlefield isn't just fought on the ground, it's fought in minds, in perceptions, and in the narratives that shape political decisions. This strike embodied that reality. By carefully choosing its target, the initiator demonstrated precision, intelligence, and a deep understanding of symbolism. The site wasn't random. It carried weight in the political and strategic landscape. It was a place that, once struck, would echo as a warning far louder than any speech or diplomatic statement. Leaders across the Middle East understood instantly, if this could be hit, so could they. The impact was not just felt by the nation targeted, but by every country watching from the sidelines. The psychological ripple effect was immediate. Governments began to reevaluate their defense systems, reassess alliances, and rethink their strategies. Even the most well-guarded capitals felt an invisible pressure, a reminder that safety was never absolute. It changed the tone of conversations in high-level meetings, replacing confidence with caution. In essence, the strike was a masterclass in strategic messaging. It told the world that power is not always about how much territory you control, but about how effectively you can influence the actions and decisions of others. And in that sense, the strike's true battleground was not on the map, but in the minds of those who now had to live with the knowledge that their vulnerability had been exposed. The timing of the strike was as deliberate as the target itself. Carried out in the stillness of the night, when the world's attention was elsewhere, it struck with the force of an unexpected storm. In the region's tense political climate, timing is not just a tactical choice, it's a weapon. This operation proved that knowing when to act can be as decisive as knowing where to strike. By choosing a moment when defenses were at their most complacent, the planners ensured maximum shock value and minimum opportunity for immediate counteraction. This wasn't merely about exploiting a gap in security, it was about psychological dominance. The strike's timing communicated a deeper message. We decide when the clock moves. It threw opponents off balance, making them realize they were not the ones dictating the tempo of events. This sudden shift in control created an atmosphere of unpredictability where every hour felt like it could bring the next move. The symbolism of the hour was equally powerful. In the dead of night, the strike became a shadow that loomed over the waking hours that followed. News spread in fragmented whispers before exploding into global headlines. Leaders woke to a changed reality, forced to respond in the light of day to something that had unfolded silently in the dark. In the days that followed, analysts, and intelligence agencies worked around the clock, not only to understand the immediate damage, but also to decipher the broader implications. The timing made the strike feel larger than a single event. It felt like a turning point. And in a region where perception shapes policy, that perception became a weapon in itself, reshaping alliances, strategies, and the very rhythm of regional power plays. The precision of the strike was what set it apart from countless other military actions in the region's turbulent history. Every detail, from the choice of weaponry to the trajectory of impact, spoke of careful calculation and deep intelligence gathering. It wasn't an indiscriminate show of force, it was a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. The target was chosen not only for its strategic value, but for its symbolic weight, ensuring that the hit would resonate far beyond the immediate destruction it caused. In conflicts, precision carries a dual effect. It limits collateral damage while maximizing the psychological impact on the intended audience. Here, the strike seemed to say, what can reach you wherever you are, with accuracy so exact you won't see it coming until it's too late. That message rippled across military command rooms, political offices, and even among civilians who understood the significance of such exactness. The aftermath revealed how meticulously the operation had been executed. Reconnaissance photos and satellite imagery showed that the target was neutralized while nearby structures remained largely untouched. This level of control is rare in a landscape where chaos often overshadows calculation. The precision not only demonstrated technical superiority, but also undermined the opponent's confidence in their own defensive capabilities. Globally, this accuracy became a talking point. Analysts debated the technology behind it, while diplomats read between the lines for what it might mean for future negotiations or escalations. Allies were impressed, adversaries were unnerved. In a region where sheer force is often mistaken for strength, this strike redefined the conversation, showing that sometimes the sharpest blow is not the loudest one, but the one that lands exactly where it's meant to, with nothing wasted. The political shockwaves of the strike traveled faster than the blast itself. In the hours that followed, capitals across the region scrambled into emergency meetings, their leaders forced to reassess alliances, military postures, and long-standing strategies. What had once been seen as fixed and predictable suddenly shifted. Old assumptions crumbled, and the sense of stability, however fragile, was replaced by an urgent, almost frantic recalibration of priorities. The strike was not just a military action, it was a political statement delivered with undeniable clarity. For allies, it was a reassurance of strength, a signal that commitments would be backed with decisive action. For adversaries, it was a warning that the margin for miscalculation had vanished. Borders, both physical and ideological, felt smaller, and the idea that any actor could operate without consequence was shattered. Internationally, reactions were mixed but intense. Some governments condemned the action, framing it as reckless and destabilizing. Others quietly admired the decisiveness, even if they wouldn't say so publicly. Diplomats found themselves caught between outrage and admiration, struggling to balance their public positions with the reality of shifting power dynamics behind closed doors. Inside the region, the political chessboard began to rearrange itself overnight. Leaders who once walked confidently into negotiations now found themselves second-guessing their leverage. Opposition groups gained momentum in some places, while in others, governments tightened their grip out of fear that the winds of change could turn against them. This wasn't a temporary ripple. It was a long-lasting current, reshaping the course of policies and priorities. The strike had changed the rules of engagement, and from that point forward, every political calculation in the Middle East would carry the shadow of that night. It became clear the strike's true power was not just in what it destroyed, but in the political realities it created. The military aftermath of the strike revealed a region suddenly gripped by both caution and urgency. Bases went on high alert, patrol routes were redrawn, and defensive systems that had long been considered adequate were reinforced overnight. Every commander knew that the strike had rewritten the rulebook. What was once thought to be a safe distance or a secure position was no longer guaranteed. For those directly involved, the lesson was unmistakable. Speed, precision, and unpredictability had become the defining factors in modern conflict. It was no longer enough to simply have a large arsenal. The ability to deploy it with surgical timing had now proven to be far more decisive. Military doctrines that had been in place for decades suddenly felt outdated, and in their place, New strategies began to form, ones that emphasized intelligence, rapid mobility, and the element of surprise above all else. The skies, seas, and deserts became different battlefields overnight. Air defenses were tested, naval units repositioned, and ground forces adjusted their tactics to counter the possibility of another strike. Even nations that were not directly targeted took notice, quietly reviewing their own vulnerabilities. But the most profound shift came in mindset. The strike had demonstrated that no fortress was truly impenetrable and no opponent entirely beyond reach. It shattered the illusion of invincibility for some and replaced it with a sobering awareness that power could be challenged in an instant. In the weeks that followed, war games and simulations became more frequent, not to prepare for a conflict that might come years later, but to brace for one that could erupt at any moment. The military balance in the region had changed, not because of the size of armies, but because one decisive act had proven that strategy and precision could outweigh even the most formidable firepower. The strike faded into the horizon, but its echo refused to die. It lingered in the quiet corridors of power, in late-night war rooms where maps were redrawn under dim lights, and in the restless minds of leaders who now understood that the rules they had relied on were gone forever. The region had crossed into uncharted territory, where trust was fragile, alliances were fluid, and every move could ignite a chain reaction no one could fully control. For some, it was a wake-up call, a reminder that in an age of precision and unpredictability, the greatest weapon was not the one most feared, but the one least expected. For others, it was a warning that their dominance could be challenged, their plans unraveled, and their power redefined in the span of a single night. The world watched, holding its breath, as the Middle East stepped into this new era, an era shaped not by slow shifts over decades, but by decisive moments that could alter the course of history in seconds. And while the strike itself became a memory, the lesson it left behind was carved deep into the region's future. In the modern battlefield, the most powerful force is the one that changes the game entirely. The strategies had shifted, the balance had tilted, and from that night onward, nothing, no border, no defense, no plan, would ever be seen the same way again.